Public funding is such a huge part of it in Europe, and in a way, it's kind of sad because a lot of fantastic filmmakers get a no from the institutes all over Europe, and then they're like, well, what to do? I'm just going to bury this big ambition, where it's kind of, you have like a lot of investment sources in America, which is there's always you can go on this and this and this, and you know what I often say, you don't have a rich uncle in Europe. There's no rich uncles, there's no private money, but it's changing. Luckily it's changing, and it's a dynamic we've been waiting for so long.
Welcome to Cinema 5D on the Go. Moving conversations about moving images with filmmakers and industry leaders. Brought to you by Tilta, Blackmagic Design, Manfrotto, and Olympus OMD in association with Sony. This is your host, Nino Leitner.
And talking about the differences between the US and Europe, I mean, in terms of the market, how do you guys see it? I mean, you represent people all over the world.
Right.
I'm sure you also have a good overview of what's, where the differences and where the similarities are. I mean, we live in a world where everything comes closer together all the time. It really doesn't matter where you live anymore so much. On the other hand, it is important to, you still deal with entities that are based in different countries, and the funding comes from there. And then we talked about this prior, where I was, for example, supposed to shoot a feature film, which I couldn't do because the funding came from another country, and they required the director to hire
that
somebody.
That happens a lot in order for them to get the rebate.
It's like it's difficult. So where do you think we stand with the similarities and differences between the markets?
There's projects that are originating in the States that are shooting elsewhere, that because of where they're shooting, they're getting certain tax breaks, and they have to hire somebody with an EU passport or whatever the case is. But that happens all the time. I mean, I think that more productions that are originating out of the States do have in mind that they would travel the DP, they would travel a production designer, especially if the director has relationships that he is planning to continue into this particular project. But every project is different, completely. Some of them will be able to bring a local, some of them will be able to travel somebody or travel the AC. It just depends. I don't know that it's a certain way within the country.
Well, how does public funding influence these decisions?
Because we don't have public funding in the
That's
States.
what I mean. You don't have it, but in Europe, I think it kind of like twists and influences the market in a way which is unnatural.
In general, I would say a lot has changed the last 5 years. Europe is looking more and more like America. Television has done a lot to it because we have a lot of American money pouring into Europe.
Lots.
And it's becoming more and more producer driven.
American movies shoot more in Europe than they do in the US.
Yeah, that's the thing, also changing the industry. But we have the public funding in Europe, which is a huge part of Northern European and European filmmaking. So let's say it's a Norwegian feature film. They get Danish funding as well, and they need to have a certain amount of spend in Denmark or on Danish talent. And in Norway, a good producer would probably know a lot of Danish DPs, for instance, but it's the same 3 DPs they would request. And then they ask us, and then they say, who do you think would be right for the project? And that happened once in a while 5 years ago. Now it's all the time. And we get it from all over Europe. We get the weirdest. We just got a Belgium DP on a Swedish television show because they got Belgium money.
I heard Rick.
That's Rick.
Congratulations.
Like, they're asking for...
And he's taking over for Martin?
They're asking for Matthias Wood.
Oh.
So they're asking for a Belgium DP in Sweden. How random is that? And how lucky is it that the DP is also really good at relationships with other DPs? So they know him. They not only respect his work, but he go to Camargue and he gets shit-faced, and he's an amazing guy, and they connect on a personal level.
Yeah.
And that's also, I think, you often focus on directors, producers, what we can do. Other DPs it's so, like for young DPs, to hook up with more experienced DPs, it's so important. That's why I'm constantly pushing like second unit work. It's not the most sexy stuff on whatever, but it's often really good experience, and it also you get involved in production, and television, second unit on television has become a really good career move for younger DPs, I feel, in Europe.
Yeah.
And back to public funding. Public funding is such a huge part of it in Europe, and in a way it's kind of sad because a lot of fantastic filmmakers get a no from the institutes all over Europe, and then they're like, well, what to do? I'm just going to bury this big ambition, where it's kind of, you have like a lot of investment sources in America, which is, there's always a, oh, you can go on this and this and this, and you know what I often say, you don't have a rich uncle in Europe. There's no rich uncles, there's no private money, but it's changing. Luckily it's changing, and it's a really, it's a dynamic we've been waiting for so long. And the funny thing is, the people that are changing it are directors that live in Los Angeles, European directors coming back and saying, okay, we have this approach to filmmaking. It's very non-European. And the Film Institute would go like, oh, you've been in Los Angeles, you're never going to get support. And they're going to, you know, a Danish feature just came out. 40% of the finance was by soccer players.
Wow.
Of the feature film.
Wow.
And you know how I can only imagine. I didn't ask the director, he just told me who paid for the stuff. But how that happened, like, I'm so sure it was at a bar, and it was like a pitch, and he was like, I have this ambition. And they were like, wow, we've never, because that's like, in Europe we're so dependent on the public funding that it kind of becomes the only source, and it's tricky.
And it twists what is actually being shot, I find. I mean, you know, like, because you have so many features or things that are funded just because the director did something before which was successful at a festival, which doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't successful with any people watching it.
Christian, I need to, because that's so interesting.
Problem,
I've heard you talk about this, like the whole thing about the size of the budget, how the movie performs box office wise. That's kind of, you sometimes feel that the film institutes in Europe, they're almost against the movie having like a box office.
As soon as something is successful, it's like, you don't need the funding. You can be successful without us. That's exactly how they think. Yeah. And that's troublesome. I mean, it's like because they think of film as this art form which needs to be like, you know, as the less people watch it, the better, in a way, sometimes, which is weird. But
so what's your take of it? Like, you know, working out of Los Angeles, and that whole, you know, we have the streaming channels, that's kind of changing the game a little bit. Who goes to watch cinema now, and what's happened, and how do you kind of assess a project in that sense?
Right. Well, taking a project because you think it's going to do great at the box office is unfortunately not an option anymore.
No.
I mean, there's just no way to tell with regards to how something is going to do and what the people in charge of the movie will do once you finish shooting. So looking at a project, I mean, like you were saying with regards to commercials, getting as much information as possible. The director's work, the director's conversations with the DP, the cast, the producers, all of those are taken into consideration and weighed when taking a project after we've gone over and looked at the creative and we know it's something that you're interested in. So then we take a look at the budget, when it's shooting, where it's shooting, and the cast. The cast is critical. It changes how things will turn out later.
And what are your thoughts about cast? Because that's another thing that I would say in Europe you're more worried about. You used to be, like, again, things are changing and they're kind of harmonizing. It's getting like, you wouldn't be that worried about getting an A-list involved in a movie, actually.
Really?
No, of course it's a producer's consideration. They know, okay, if we put that guy in, that's automatically gonna sell 1 million tickets. Or
you would think, though. So like, I mean, we've seen movies with really huge stars that before were a sure win in the box office fail miserably.
Yeah.
I mean, Brad Pitt's movie. I don't want to name names, but you know what I mean. There's multiple high-end actors. That's why I was saying at this point, I feel like, you know, more eyes will see it if it's coming out on HBO or Netflix.
Yeah.
You know, but again, even with something streaming, you have to know that there's a proper marketing budget. You know, what's their plan for?
That's
when do
the
they plan to
thing.
release it?
Yeah.
Is it all coming out at one time, or are they gonna?
What's the power behind pushing it out there?
Absolutely.
Because I think we can all agree upon. Because I think, you know, I do this as a poor excuse of watching movies all the time, because, and I don't.
We all do that.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how to shoot, and I hate producing, and so this is just it. So I love watching movies, and in an ideal world, everyone would go and watch like all these. Like a good example is, let's keep to Manuel Klaus shot Nymphomaniac for Lars von Trier. I really like that movie. It's kind of provocating and Lars von Trier-ish. I think in Denmark it sold 1,600 tickets. 1,600 sold. I would like 80% of it was like giveaway tickets. I would love that movie to be shown.
Yeah.
But it's not going to draw an audience on itself. And a lot of these amazing art house projects, it's also about the producers' experience and willingness to push it to festivals, how they're gonna market it.
Yeah.
Are they gonna, you know, do they have a clever plan, or at least are they putting resources? And I'm not only meaning, this is not about the money, it's also about the commitment to try to get people to watch this actual film.
Well, you see it especially with publicly funded films in Austria, for example, it's like, you know, even if it's a great film, sometimes they, you know, just people don't know about it because there's no marketing budget anymore.
Right.
As soon as they are done with the production and it gets out, they kind of have to move on to the next project, because the whole funding bodies, they put so little emphasis on actually funding the marketing side of the film, which actually can make or break it.
No, but that's why, one of the reasons why we love to go here into festivals as professionals. But, you know, a good example is, you know, later today they're screening music videos. A lot of those music videos are shot to be shown at cinema, but they don't show it at cinema. So whose obligation is it that they actually screen the thing, that they push it? Not only talking about music videos, but in general, assessing a project, I feel like the powers behind to push it and get it out there, it's so important, but it's super, super tricky. And the public funded, Christian, it's so awful in Europe. It feels like you still have this thing that as long as integrity is so important, artistic integrity is so important, that you can even, like, it's so amazing to talk with the trailer editors from Los Angeles, because they're making fantastic trailers that would actually get people in the cinema. In Europe, you make trailers and the directors do all the decisions.
Really?
If I were a director and I made a feature film, I would hate for someone to make a resume, 90 seconds, but so I would try to get everything in, but that's not automatically not what's going to get people in the cinema.
Yeah.
So you want to seduce people to get them in the cinema, and that, you know, it's too vulnerable for the director to make those decisions. Maybe even the creative producer involved, and that's, in my opinion, so unprofessional. The way we market film in Europe. Oh, don't even get me started. It's so depressing.
Well, that's a whole new world, I think, opening. I think one good way of actually being successful with marketing a film is, of course, kind of viral marketing, whatever that means, but you need to, you know, that's not fitting for every project. I mean, for example, a director I worked with on a short film, he managed to really have a great campaign behind it, because it ended up getting like 4.5 million views on YouTube, which is not bad for a German language short film of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just because he had his community behind it, because it was
absolutely.
It was gay themed, and it had kind of like a coming of age story, and, you know, the problems that he went through basically made into a film, and this landed him his first feature film. So, but he really worked on this community beforehand, before he actually started embarking on that project. But of course, I mean, it's not easy to do that for for every story.
No, and for some directors are really good at doing part of that marketing project themselves, especially when they're younger.
Yeah.
But other people, like other directors, are introvert and not comfortable with that, and they shouldn't be the ones doing
Yeah.
it. They need help. They need someone to push it out there. Just the same way with DPs. Some DPs are totally confident, social, going out there, and other ones might need someone to help them a little
Yeah.
bit. Maybe an agent.